In the year 1400, in a narrow shop on London Bridge, a man settled into a wooden chair for his weekly appointment. The barber sharpened his razor on a leather strop, shaved the man's face, trimmed his hair, and then, without changing tools or washing his hands, rolled up the customer's sleeve, opened a vein with the same blade, and drained a bowl of his blood. The customer paid, thanked him, and walked out feeling, he was certain, much healthier. Nobody in the shop found any of this strange, because for 600 years, the man who cut your hair was also the man who cut you open. The barber is not a hairdresser who once dabbled in medicine. The barber is a surgeon who was slowly stripped of his scalpel and left holding the scissors. The striped pole outside every barbershop on earth is not a decoration. It is a medical sign, advertising blood. This is the full story of the strangest career change in history, and why the most trusted blade in your life belongs to the person history demoted. The story begins with a superstition and a piece of sharpened flint. Barbers are among the oldest professionals on record, working in Egypt more than 5,000 years ago. And in the ancient world, their job was closer to priesthood than grooming. Many early cultures believed that spirits, good and evil, lived in the hair, and that cutting it was a spiritual operation to be performed carefully and ritually. Egyptian priests shaved their entire bodies every other day for purity. Razors of copper and gold were buried with pharaohs for use in the afterlife, and the barber who maintained all this holiness held real status. The Greeks turned the barbershop into something we would recognize instantly, a social institution. The agora barber trimmed beards and traded gossip, and a Greek phrase for asking about rumors was, roughly, what's new at the barber's? Rome fell in love even harder. When barbers arrived in Rome, the tonsure became indispensable. The daily shave became a mark of civilization. A young Roman's first shave was celebrated as a religious coming of age, and the tonstrina, the barbershop, became the neighborhood's newsroom, therapist's couch, and debate club in one. 25 centuries later, that part has not changed at all. But the fateful turn, the decision that put a razor to the world's veins, came from medicine's strange history. Ancient doctors believed health depended on the balance of 4 bodily fluids, the humors, and that too much blood caused fever, madness, and disease. The cure was to remove some, a practice called bloodletting, and it remained standard medicine in Europe for well over 1,000 years. Somebody had to do the cutting. And in the monasteries of the early Middle Ages, where monks required regular bloodletting as a matter of routine and also needed their ritual bald spot, the tonsure, shaved regularly. One man already had the sharpest blades and the steadiest hands, the monastery's barber. Then came the hinge of the entire story, and it arrived, of all places, from the church. In 1163, the Council of Tours, under Pope Alexander III, forbade clergy from performing bloodletting, ruling that the shedding of blood was incompatible with holy office. University-trained physicians, a proud and tiny elite who studied texts and diagnosed from a distance, considered cutting flesh to be manual labor, far beneath their dignity. So the entire bloody side of medicine, the actual touching of actual patients, fell into the only hands left, the barbers. With one decree, the man with the razor became the man with the scalpel. The barber-surgeon was born. For the next 6 centuries, the barber-surgeon was the working man's entire medical system. He pulled rotten teeth, lanced boils, set broken bones, stitched wounds, amputated limbs on battlefields, applied leeches, and bled kings and peasants alike, all between haircuts and shaves. The famous pole outside his shop was pure advertising, and its symbols were literal. The pole itself represented the wooden staff patients gripped to bulge their veins during bloodletting. The red stripes were the blood. The white stripes were the bandages, which were washed and hung to dry, twisting around a pole outside the shop. In England, the barber-surgeon's window displayed bowls of fresh blood. The barber pole spinning outside a shop today is a surgeon's shingle, and almost nobody who walks under it knows. The trade organized itself like every serious medieval profession. London's barbers formed a guild by the early 1300s, and in 1540, King Henry VIII merged the barbers and the small rival guild of surgeons into a single company of barber-surgeons, a union immortalized in a painting by Holbein of the king himself presiding over the merger. The rules drew a careful line down the middle of the razor. Barbers were limited to shaving, tooth pulling, and bloodletting, while surgeons were forbidden from cutting hair. One company, 2 blades, endless bickering. And it was a barber who became the greatest surgeon of the age. Ambroise Paré, a French barber-surgeon born around 1510, too poor for university and unable to read the Latin of the physicians, learned his trade in the wards of a Paris hospital and on the battlefields of France. There, he changed medicine forever. The standard treatment for gunshot wounds was boiling oil poured into the flesh. One night, running out of oil, Paré dressed the remaining soldiers with a gentle salve and found in the morning that his patients slept while the boiled ones screamed. He never used oil again. He revived the ligature, tying off arteries during amputations instead of searing the stump with hot iron. He designed artificial limbs. He served 4 successive kings of France, and he gave medicine one of its humblest sentences. I dressed him, God healed him. The finest surgical mind of the Renaissance was, by training and by guild, the man who cut hair. But the barber's glory carried the seed of his demotion. Surgery kept advancing. Anatomy became a science. And the surgeons, increasingly educated and increasingly proud, wanted nothing more to do with the shop and the strop. In 1745, the surgeons of London finally forced a divorce, splitting from the barbers to form their own company, which in 1800 became the Royal College of Surgeons. The barbers kept the Guildhall, the pole, and the scissors. The surgeons took the scalpel, the status, and eventually the fortune. One ghost of the old marriage survives to this day. British surgeons, upon qualifying, traditionally drop the title doctor and are addressed as Mr., a badge that once marked them as mere craftsmen, brothers of the barbers, now worn upside down as a badge of pride. Every Mr. in a London operating theatre is a barber's heir. Stripped of surgery, the barber did what he had always done best. He held the chair, and the chair held the community. In 19th century America, the barbershop entered its golden age. All marble counters, leather thrones, hot towels, and conversation. For Black Americans in particular, the barbershop became an economic and social institution of the first rank, one of the earliest paths to independent business ownership, and a rare room where the community could speak freely. It remains, to this day, a cornerstone of neighborhood life and local politics. The shop even gave its name to a style of music, the barbershop quartet, born from customers harmonizing while they waited. Then came the 20th century's ambush, and it arrived not as a rival barber but as a piece of stamped steel. King Camp Gillette's safety razor, launched in 1903, moved the daily shave from the barber's chair to the bathroom sink, and sold by the hundreds of millions. The barber's bread and butter for 2,500 years, the shave, quietly evaporated. Chain salons and the unisex haircut squeezed the trade further. And by the 1980s, the classic barbershop looked like a dying institution, a nostalgia piece with a spinning pole. It refused to die, and here are the numbers of its strange afterlife. The barbershop business in the United States alone is worth roughly $5 billion a year, part of a global men's grooming market measured at over $60 billion and growing. America has over 100,000 working barbers, and becoming one legally requires a state license that typically demands around 1,500 hours of supervised training, which is several times the training required of some emergency medical responders, a fact that would have made a medieval barber-surgeon smile. The past 2 decades brought a full-blown barbershop renaissance. Traditional shops with straight razors, hot lather, and $30 fades, selling exactly what the Roman Tanstrina sold, not just a haircut but membership in a room. The beard boom of the 2010s did what no marketing campaign could. It sent millions of young men back to a professional with a blade. Because that, in the end, is the barber's true inheritance, and it is worth naming precisely. Medicine took back the scalpel, the leeches are gone, and the blood left the window bowls long ago. But the barber remains the last stranger civilization permits to hold an open blade against your throat, and we grant that permission without a flicker of fear, on a walk-in basis for the price of lunch. That trust was not invented by advertising. It was earned across 5,000 years, vein by vein, wound by wound, chair by chair, by the profession that patched humanity together for centuries, while the physicians kept their hands clean. The haircut was never really the product. The trust is the product. That's not an accident. That's the business model. The surgeon who used to cut your hair still stands behind the chair, and the bloody sign of his old trade still spins over the door. The least you can do, next time you walk under the red and white pole, is know exactly what it advertised, and tip the man holding the razor. If this video changed how you look at that spinning pole, subscribe, because next we're covering more everyday institutions with histories they forgot to warn you about.